Some people walk out the door and never return. No struggle, no ransom note, just a cold, empty space where they used to be. What if the only trace someone left behind was a pair of shoes, neatly placed on a bridge, and a single sentence scrawled in a notebook? On the evening of November 25, 1997, a young woman named Sydney West kissed her mother goodnight and went upstairs to her bedroom in their home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She was 19 years old, bright, creative, a sophomore at the university. She'd been texting friends earlier that day, making plans for Thanksgiving break. Nothing seemed out of place. The next morning, her mother knocked on her door. No answer. She opened it. Sydney's bed was made. Her wallet and phone sat on the nightstand. But Sydney was gone. Wait, that's not quite right. Let me start over. Because this isn't Sydney West's story. It's another disappearance. One that happened decades before hers. One that left behind the same kind of aching silence. And one small, eerie clue. On the morning of September 30th, 1989, a jogger crossed the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco just after dawn. The fog was still thick. The air smelled like salt and cold metal. About halfway across, near the east sidewalk, the jogger slowed. Something had been left on the pedestrian walkway. A pair of women's shoes, black flats, placed side by side, neatly, as if someone had stepped out of them on purpose. The jogger kept running, but the image stuck. Later that day, when the shoes were still there, someone called the bridge patrol. They were collected, logged, and eventually matched to a missing persons report filed the night before. A 23-year-old woman named Laura had left her apartment in the Sunset District the previous evening. She told her roommate she was going for a walk. She never came back. Laura's roommate described her as quiet, thoughtful, a little distant lately, but not in a way that felt dangerous. She worked at a bookstore near Ocean Beach. She liked to draw, mostly portraits, mostly of strangers she saw on the bus. Her sketchbook was found in her apartment, open on the kitchen table. The last page had a single sentence written in pencil. "I want to see what it feels like to be nothing." That sentence was the only thing Laura left behind besides the shoes. No note, no letter, no goodbye. The Golden Gate Bridge is one of the most common places in the world for people to disappear. Over 1,800 known deaths since it opened. But not every body is recovered. The water is cold. The current is fast. Sometimes the ocean just keeps what it takes. Investigators searched for Laura. Coast Guard boats swept the bay. Divers went under the bridge. Nothing. Weeks turned into months. Her family held a memorial service, but they couldn't bring themselves to say the word funeral. Because without a body, it didn't feel real. Her mother kept calling the police. She told them Laura wouldn't do this, that she had plans, that she'd been saving money for a trip to New York. But the shoes on the bridge told a different story, and so did the sentence in the sketchbook. What no one could explain was why Laura placed her shoes so carefully. If someone is in crisis, standing on a bridge in the fog, do they stop to arrange their shoes? Do they step out of them gently, like they're entering someone's home? Or was it something else, a ritual, a final act of control, a way of saying, "This is my choice"? Years later, a forensic psychologist reviewed Laura's case. She said that placing shoes is not uncommon in bridge disappearances. It can be a symbolic gesture, leaving something behind to prove you existed. Or it can be practical. Shoes are heavy. They make it harder to climb, harder to let go. But there's another theory, one that Laura's best friend from college still believes. She said Laura had been talking, in the weeks before she disappeared, about starting over, about wanting to be someone else, about how easy it would be to walk away from your life if you were brave enough. What if Laura didn't jump? What if she left the shoes there on purpose, knowing what people would think? What if she walked off that bridge, into the fog, and became someone new? In 2003, a woman matching Laura's description was reportedly seen working at a small gallery in Portland, Oregon. A former co-worker from the bookstore happened to be visiting the city. She swore it was Laura. Same face, same posture. But when she approached, the woman looked confused, said her name was Claire, said she'd never been to San Francisco. The co-worker didn't push it. She walked away. But she never stopped wondering. In 2011, a hiker found a driver's license buried in the sand near Stinson Beach, just north of the bridge. The name on the license was Laura's, but the photo had been scratched out. It was turned over to police, but by then the case was cold. No follow-up investigation was launched. Laura's mother died in 2016. She never stopped looking. She kept a box under her bed with Laura's sketchbook, a few drawings, and a single black flat. The other shoe had been lost somewhere in evidence storage. The last drawing in Laura's sketchbook is a portrait of a woman standing on a bridge. She's facing away. Her shoes are on the ground beside her. Her arms are open, and in the bottom corner, in tiny letters, Laura had written, "Is this how you become the sky?" Some people believe Laura jumped that morning.
That the fog swallowed her, and the sea kept her.
Others think she walked away, that she's still out there, under a new name, living the kind of life where no one knows where you came from. Either way, Laura is gone. And the only proof she was ever on that bridge is a pair of black shoes placed side by side, and a question she left behind in a sketchbook. A question no one has ever been able to answer. What if the last person to see you alive was a stranger in a gas station, and the only thing they remembered was that you seemed afraid? Sometimes disappearances don't begin with a scream or a struggle. They begin with a glance over the shoulder, a hurried movement, a feeling that something is wrong. If you've ever had that feeling, like you were being watched or followed, let me know in the comments. Sometimes our instincts are trying to tell us something. On the night of July 8, 2004, a man named David walked into a Chevron station just outside Bend, Oregon. It was 11:43 p.m. The clerk remembered the time because she was about to start closing duties. David was 31 years old, tall, thin, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. He bought a pack of Marlboro Reds and a bottle of water. He paid in cash. And as he turned to leave, he paused at the door and looked back over his shoulder. Not at the clerk, at the parking lot behind him. The clerk said later that his expression stuck with her. He looked nervous, maybe scared, like he was checking to see if someone had followed him inside. She asked if he was okay. David nodded quickly, said, "Yeah, just tired." Then he walked out. The security camera caught him getting into a white Ford Ranger. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Then he pulled out onto Highway 97, heading south. That was the last confirmed sighting of David Ramirez. David's family reported him missing 3 days later. He'd been driving from Seattle to visit his parents in Northern California. It was a trip he'd made a dozen times. Straight shot down I-5, no stops except for gas. But somewhere near the Oregon-California border, David had veered off course. He'd taken a detour, east, into the high desert. No one knew why. His truck was found 6 days later by a pair of hikers near the town of Christmas Valley. It was parked on a dirt access road, about 2 miles off the highway. The driver's side door was open. The keys were still in the ignition. The cigarettes he'd bought were on the dashboard, unopened. The bottle of water was in the cup holder, half empty. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the vehicle. But there was something else. On the passenger seat, written in blue ink on a gas station receipt, was a single sentence. "If I don't make it, tell them I tried to go back." The handwriting matched David's, but no one could figure out what he meant. Go back where? To Seattle? To the gas station? To somewhere else entirely? Search teams combed the desert for weeks. dogs picked up David's scent leading away from the truck, heading northwest toward a dried riverbed. The trail went cold after half a mile. David's mother told reporters that her son had seemed distracted in the weeks before his trip. He'd mentioned an old friend reaching out, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't know the friend's name. David didn't offer it, but he'd seemed uneasy about it, like the past had knocked on his door and he wasn't sure whether to answer. Investigators tried to trace David's movements in the days before he disappeared. His phone records showed that he'd received 3 calls from an unlisted number in the 72 hours before he left Seattle. Each call lasted less than a minute. The number was traced to a prepaid cell phone, bought in cash, activated in Portland, never used again after the night David vanished. David's best friend, Marcus, said that David had been involved in something years earlier, something he didn't like to talk about. Back in college, David and a group of friends had gone on a road trip to eastern Oregon. They'd been hiking near Steens Mountain when they stumbled across an old cabin. Inside, they found evidence that someone had been living there recently. Clothes, canned food, a sleeping bag, and a wall covered in newspaper clippings, all about missing persons cases from the 1990s. Marcus said they didn't stick around, they left quickly and never reported it. David had joked about it at the time, said it was probably just some off-the-grid hermit. But years later, when Marcus brought it up, David didn't laugh. He said, "I think someone saw us that day." The cabin was never found. Authorities searched the area based on Marcus's description, but the landscape had changed. Wildfires had swept through. Old roads had been swallowed by brush. If the cabin had ever existed, it was gone now. There's a theory that David's detour wasn't random, that he was meeting someone or looking for something. The note on the receipt suggests he knew he was in danger, that he was trying to retrace his steps, maybe back to that cabin, maybe back to that trip, maybe to fix something he thought he'd left undone. In 2007, a ranger in the Ochako National Forest reported finding a gray hoodie hanging from a tree branch. It was weathered, faded by sun and rain, but the size and style matched what David had been wearing. DNA testing was inconclusive. The hoodie had been exposed to the elements too long. David's father spent years driving the back roads of eastern Oregon. He'd take time off work and camp in his truck searching. He put up flyers in every small town between Bend and the Nevada border. He offered a reward. No one came forward. In 2015, he stopped searching, not because he gave up, but because his health failed. He died 2 years later. David's mother still lives in the same house. She keeps the porch light on every night, just in case. There are people who believe David is still out there, that he's living off the grid, hiding from whoever called him that night. Others think he met someone on that dirt road, someone who made sure he never made it home. And some think he walked into the desert on purpose, that the note was his way of saying goodbye, that he was going back to something he could never escape. But here's the part that stays with me. The clerk at the Chevron said that when David looked back over his shoulder, his lips were moving, like he was talking to himself, or praying. She couldn't hear what he said, but she remembered thinking, even then, that he looked like someone who'd already made up his mind. David's truck was sold at auction in 2009. The receipt with the note was filed in evidence. The unopened pack of cigarettes was never claimed. And somewhere in the high desert of Oregon, the wind still moves through sagebrush and juniper, over dirt roads that go nowhere, past places where people have walked and never returned. And if you listen closely, on a night when the air is still, you might hear something, not a voice, not a cry, just the faint sound of footsteps moving away, getting quieter, until there's nothing left but silence. What if you vanished from a place where vanishing should be impossible? A bright afternoon, witnesses everywhere, security cameras, guards, and yet somehow you step through a door and are never seen again. If you're still with me after these 3 stories, I'd love to hear which one affected you most. Drop a comment and let me know. Your thoughts mean more than you might think. On the afternoon of March 12, 2011, a woman named Rebecca Chen checked into the Pacific Grand Hotel in downtown Vancouver. She was 26 years old, a graphic designer from Toronto, in town for a conference. She checked in at 2:17 p.m. The front desk clerk remembered her because she'd asked for a room on a high floor with a view of the mountains. She was given room 1421, 14th floor, corner suite. Rebecca rode the elevator up with her small rolling suitcase and a leather portfolio. A security camera in the hallway captured her walking to her room. She unlocked the door with her key card, stepped inside. The door closed behind her. That was 2:22 p.m. At 4:35 p.m., the same hallway camera picked her up again. Rebecca stepped out of her room, still wearing the same clothes. Black blazer, white blouse, jeans. She wasn't carrying anything. Not her purse, not her phone, not her room key. She walked down the hall, away from the elevators. Calm, steady, not rushing. She turned left at the end of the corridor. And then she disappeared, literally. The camera at the far end of the hall, the one that should have caught her next, recorded nothing. No Rebecca, no one else, just an empty hallway. When Rebecca didn't show up for the evening keynote at her conference, a colleague tried calling her. No answer. The colleague went to the hotel and asked the front desk to check on her. Security went up to room 1421. They knocked. No response. They used a master key and opened the door. Rebecca's suitcase was on the bed, unopened. Her phone was charging on the nightstand. Her wallet and ID were in her purse, sitting on the desk. The room looked untouched, like she'd walked in, set her things down, and walked right back out. The only odd detail was the bathroom. The light was on. The mirror was fogged, like someone had just taken a hot shower, but the towels were dry. Hotel security reviewed the footage. They confirmed Rebecca had entered her room at 2:22 p.m. and exited at 4:35 p.m. But after she turned the corner at the end of the hall, there was nothing. No footage of her entering the stairwell, no footage of her at the elevators, no footage of her on any other floor. She had walked into a dead-end corridor with no exits, except the way she came, and she never came back. Vancouver police launched an investigation. They searched every floor, every stairwell, every storage closet, the roof, the basement, the parking garage. Nothing. They interviewed every guest on the 14th floor. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. One guest, in room 1419, said she thought she'd heard a door close around 4:30 p.m. But she hadn't looked out. She was on a work call. Investigators pulled Rebecca's phone records. In the 2 hours she was in her room, she'd made one phone call to her older sister in Toronto. The call lasted 8 minutes. Her sister said Rebecca had sounded fine, maybe a little tired. She'd talked about the conference, about how nice the hotel was, about wanting to go for a walk later to see the waterfront. Nothing felt wrong. The call ended normally. Rebecca said, "I'll call you tomorrow." But there was something her sister remembered later. Something small. Right before Rebecca hung up, she'd paused. And then she'd said, "Do you ever get the feeling you've been somewhere before, but you know you haven't?" Her sister had laughed it off, said, "That's just déjà vu." Rebecca had said, "Yeah, maybe." And then she'd hung up. Police checked the hotel's entry and exit logs. Rebecca's keycard had only been used twice. Once to enter her room at 2:22 p.m., once to open the minibar at 3:10 p.m. She'd taken a bottle of water. That was it. She never left the building. At least, not through any door that required a keycard or was covered by a camera. Investigators brought in cadaver dogs. They searched the walls, the ceilings, the ventilation shafts. They checked for hidden panels or old service corridors from when the building was first constructed in the 1970s. Nothing. One theory suggested Rebecca had staged her own disappearance, but her bank accounts were never touched. Her credit cards were never used. Her passport was still in her suitcase. She had no history of mental illness, no financial troubles, no relationship conflicts. Her life, by all accounts, was stable. Another theory involved foul play, but there were no signs of struggle, no suspicious individuals on camera, no one entering or leaving her room except Rebecca. And the hotel had over 200 guests that weekend. Any one of them could have been involved, but there were no leads, no connections. The most unsettling theory came from a retired detective who reviewed the case years later. He pointed out that the hallway where Rebecca disappeared had been under renovation 2 months before she checked in. Old wiring had been replaced. Some walls had been moved. It's possible, he said, that there was a gap, a space between the old layout and the new one, somewhere a person could slip into, accidentally or otherwise, and if that space led to an old shaft or a sealed-off section of the building, someone could be lost inside for years. In 2014, during a routine inspection, workers found a small opening behind a service panel on the 14th floor. It led to a narrow crawl space that ran between 2 walls. The space was about 2 feet wide. It extended down to the 13th floor. At the bottom was a pile of old drywall, dust, and debris. And underneath, investigators found a single black shoe. A woman's flat, size 7. Rebecca wore size 7. DNA testing was conducted. The results were inconclusive. The shoe had been there for years, exposed to moisture and temperature changes. It could have been Rebecca's, or it could have belonged to someone else entirely. Rebecca's family held a memorial service in 2016, 5 years after she vanished. They decided it was time to say goodbye, but her younger brother refused to attend. He told reporters he still believed she was alive, that she'd walked into something she couldn't get out of, and that one day, someone would find her. The Pacific Grand Hotel still operates today. Room 1421 is still rented out. Guests have reported strange occurrences over the years, doors opening on their own, the sound of footsteps in the hallway at night, a faint knocking from inside the walls. The hotel management denies any paranormal activity. They say the building is old, that it settles. That sounds travel in strange ways, but housekeeping staff will tell you, off the record, that they don't like working the 14th floor, especially near the end of the corridor, where the camera stops, where Rebecca turned left and never came back. Sometimes I wonder what she saw in those last moments. Did she realize she was walking into something she couldn't return from? Or did it happen so fast she never even had time to be afraid? Maybe she's still there, somewhere in the bones of that building, in a space that doesn't exist on any blueprint, waiting for someone to find the right door, the right wall, the right question to ask. Or maybe she walked through something the rest of us can't see, a threshold we don't have a name for, and wherever she is now, she's beyond the reach of cameras, beyond the reach of search dogs and investigators and family who still leave her phone number saved in their contacts, just in case. Rebecca Chen is still classified as a missing person. Her case remains open. And somewhere in Vancouver, on the 14th floor of a hotel by the water, a hallway ends in silence.